Affairs don't begin in the bedroom, they begin in childhood. In the part of you that decided she needed to bury her truth just to be loved. The part that's now screaming to be seen. I'm Alex Croxford, and this is the Deeper Love podcast, where we name the shame, face the guilt, and help you find your way back to yourself. So let's begin.
Hello and welcome to the Deeper Love podcast. I am so excited to be introducing this wonderful guest today, Jessica Hayes, who is a self-love and relationship coach and is one of my very good friends. We actually met at a retreat in 2024 where we spent a week together on a Layla Martin retreat training to be sex, love and relationship coaches. But Jess has the most incredible story, and I really wanted to bring this to my listeners because I think it's going to help you all so much. I don't want to share the story because I want to hand over to Jess for her to share, and I really hope that you are going to get as much out of this episode as I really believe you are. So welcome, Jess.
Hello, thank you so much for having me, and thank you for a beautiful intro. I'm so excited to be here and talk about my side of the story of what it's like to reconnect, repair after there is infidelity in a relationship. It was you that said, I really want you to come on and kind of be a voice for the other side of what it's been like to repair and to reconnect, because when we navigate infidelity, there is definitely a real big a focus on once a cheat, always a cheat, leave them. That's kind of the main pathway that most people tend to take. Or the other pathway is we ignore it, we sweep it under the rug and just pretend it never happened. And, what I really love about mine and my partner's Sam, our story, is that we essentially created a new pathway of get everything out from under the rug, put everything on the table. Let's really dive deep into what got us to this point. How did we get there? How can we both take accountability and responsibility for the actions that we both took that led to the breakdown of our relationship? By bringing these conversations to the forefront, hopefully with the intention I'm assuming that we both have, is actually being able to create a non-judgmental, shame-free space where people can hear both perspectives of what kind of leads us to get into a situation where someone cheats, someone lies, someone breaks the trust, essentially. I know it's been a huge catalyst to my own growth, that I'm really excited to share with everyone.
Yeah, I love that. Thank you so much for sharing that. And yeah, we were just talking before we came on to press record, and one of the things we were talking about is the number of people who admit to cheating, and it's you said to me in the UK is between 40 to 50% of people have experienced or have cheated on a partner in their either marriages or their long-term relationships. And we have to remember that that's just what people are admitting. There's a lot of people that won't admit that because there's so much shame. And yet, if this is such a common experience for so many people in relationships, then we need to start having conversations about how and why and healing and being able to work through it. And it doesn't automatically mean the end of a relationship. And there was times with my ex-husband that for a year I thought maybe we were going to find our way through, maybe we were going to come out of this stronger, and I really hoped for that. Now I know that was never meant to be our path, and everything has worked out exactly as it should. But that's why I'm so excited for you to share a little bit more of your story, Jess, and basically what led up to the betrayal and how it happened, how you discovered it, and what happened after that. Because I think your story is such a powerful one to share. And as you said, there's not a lot of ease. That has been difficult, but it is possible, and it's possible to heal, and it's possible to grow even stronger. And we don't have to just brush it under the carpet, and we don't just have to end our relationship, but it takes a strong woman and a strong man to stay and to do this work, I know. And I really would love for you to take us back to where this all started.
So Sam and I have been together now for 6 years. Neither of us were on the path of self-development, of kind of introspective thoughts or anything like that. We were very kind of living I say in inverted commas, the normal life of what we're kind of told to live. You know, get a job, save, buy a house, get a mortgage, get a dog, like that's you settled kind of thing. I got into therapy, got into that kind of work, and I started to see immediate changes within the relationship because there was so much expectation, and I actually think it is expectation. It was so much expectation that I was putting on my partner to fulfill all of these needs for me that actually was putting all of this strain on the relationship that I couldn't see. It was like the invisible, unspoken pieces that I wanted him to somehow fix, and he couldn't, you know, because it starts with me. And once I started getting into therapy and then getting into coaching and really uncovering, like, why don't I love myself? Why do I not like my body? Why do I not like what I look like? Why do I not feel fulfilled? Like all of these things that I started to take radical responsibility for, we started to see a change in the relationship. But he wasn't in a stage where he was ready to look at his side. And I think this is such a common piece to really reflect on, because I get so many questions from my clients and just people that I've met throughout the couple of years of being in this space of what do I do when my partner doesn't want to do the work? How do I navigate this kind of turmoil of like, I'm changing, I'm growing, I'm willing to take accountability, but my partner's not doing it. And it's kind of a hard truth with it. It's because one person can't do the work for two. Like it's physically impossible. It does take two of you to do the work. I dominated the relationship emotionally, energetically, even just from an unconscious perspective, it was always about my emotion, how I was feeling, what I wanted things to change, how I wanted things to change, and that I would then point the finger and be like, well, tell me what you want. Like, you're not stepping up, you're not doing enough, like, why are you like this, whatever it might be. But actually the approach that I was doing, essentially pointing the finger, was only repelling him and pushing him further into a corner that was actually pulling us apart, not pulling us together. But because I didn't know any other way to communicate, that's all I was doing. And we actually got to a stage that we could see growth, we could see change, we could see that things were improving, and it was like amazing, like things are starting to get the ball rolling. And I actually remember bringing a point to my coach at the time of, he's still not doing the work, like it's been 6 months, like I don't know what to do. And she said, well, are you happy where you are? And I was like, no, like I'm not happy in this relationship. And ultimately she asked me, if he never changes, would you be satisfied with this kind of relationship for the rest of your life? And I was like, no, I wouldn't. There's so much more that I want for myself and for the kind of relationship that I wanted. And we had this conversation, and again, never knew how to communicate properly, didn't know how to navigate conflict, didn't know how to repair. Like our repair was essentially either screaming and shouting at each other, someone goes for a walk, you come back, you might chat about it a little bit, you get a takeaway, you have sex, and then that's kind of you thinking that you've repaired the conflict. But you haven't. You haven't really touched the surface of why all of these things have come to the surface in the first place. But we didn't know any other way. And we would just get takeout, get food delivered to the house, and then we would have sex, watch a film, and we would think that we've repaired, but we hadn't actually done anything. And that was our routine every time. And it actually was then January of 2023, and I just qualified to be a self-love coach. I was so ready. I was like, yes, this is what I'm doing. I'm so excited for this year. It's going to be the best year yet. All of these things. And 3 weeks into January, I got made redundant from my job that I'd been at for 6 years. And a week later, Sam broke up with me. And it was completely, essentially out the blue. And there was no understanding of why. I didn't know why it ended. I didn't know what had happened. Essentially, the whole purpose or meaning behind the breakup was, you deserve better. I can't give you what you need. You know, I'm not the man for you. You need to go and find this other man that can give you all of these things. And I was like, well, I don't understand. Like, I don't understand. That's not a reason. Like, these are reasons that you've come up with, but what's actually behind all of this? I can't be in this relationship anymore. I need to go on a healing journey, but I need to do it on my own. I can't be in a relationship and do it at the same time. we shared such similar values, belief systems, like desires, goals, family orientated. There were so many things, essentially from core pillars, that would actually make this relationship really good if we knew what we were doing with it and how to make it work. But because both of us were living in our own worlds of shame and stories and limiting beliefs of what we thought was possible, how we thought about ourselves, that was all that was running the show. So although from the core pillars we were actually a really good match, we couldn't get past our own shit. And I remember I said to my friend, there's something that he's not telling me. Like it was so obvious. And I think this is the same for so many people that can relate, of being the one that's been cheated on. You feel it, like energetically you feel it. And I think this is where we either gaslight ourselves or we get gaslit for shit by other people, of like, no, you're making it up, like what you're feeling isn't true. You know, you're taking yourself to that place to feel shit about yourself, like that's not true. And I was like, there is something here, and I can't put my finger on it, but I just know I'm not being told the full truth. And it just kind of ended in that way. It was super amicable, like we didn't fall out. Like, yeah, there were moments of like, what the fuck is actually happening? We had to sell our house. We went completely separate ways. He moved back to his parents, I moved back to my family home. And it was like, right, cool, done. That was it. And he was like, I was in a space of like, I trust this. I was already at the precipice of like, I don't think this is going to work out if he's not going to do the work. So there was a part of me that had a bit more acceptance with it. But he was devastated. And I thought, there's something to this. I don't know what it is, but there's something here. And I said to my friend, I think he's cheated. Like, I just know it. And she was like, no, like, honestly, Jess, he's not done that. And I was like, I might never know, because he's not. I asked him, he said no. And I remember saying to him the day we left, I said, I know something's happened. And I said, when you're ready, you'll tell me. And I said, but obviously you can't face it yet. So we have to end like this, on these terms. And I remember we were living in Scotland because he's Scottish, and I drove back. And then we kind of went no contact for a bit. We had to just speak about like logistic things, where like contracts, getting things legally signed, moving money around when the house was sold, those kind of things. And then we said no contact. And I really advise people doing it is either muting or unfollowing your ex-partner, because it's just good for the soul to be able to have a full switch off. So we'd muted each other. We agreed that this is what we were going to do. So we were aware. But I actually followed another guy in Scotland who ran men retreats and helped men going on a journey of healing and growth. And he'd actually shared some stuff. And obviously, by my surprise, it was Sam. So I was like, oh, he's started going. So the breakup was obviously the catalyst for him to get into that space. And he'd been at a retreat all weekend, because I'd seen from this guy's Instagram. And he'd got back and obviously put a call in with me. So I was like, okay, I'm being told something. And by this point, we'd been separated for 4 months. We jumped on the call, and he was so awkward, so uncomfortable. And I just said, just tell me. Who was it and when did you do it? And he just broke down, and he was like, how did you know? I was like, I've known for months. You just weren't ready to tell me, but, I'm not stupid. I can feel it. I could feel it in my whole body. And I think that's the case with so many people. We know, there's a reason why you start getting paranoid about checking their phone. There's a reason why you start getting anxious about certain things. There's usually reasons, not all the time. Like sometimes it is like, right, where do you have trust issues that maybe stem from previous relationships? But also of like, okay, where does this come from? So we had this conversation, and to say I lost my shit is an understatement. I was so angry. I was so mad. I was so hurt. And I think also the lies, like it's been so long, and because it'd been 4 or 5 months, I was already so far into my healing, me getting support, going to different places, building communities, like really moving through and like loving single girl era, which is a really great place to be when you're in this space of, this is all about me. I'm going to focus everything on myself, my healing, my growth, like living my best single girl life. So I was so angry, and, he shared his side, And I understood it. I don't know whether I could have understood it 2 years prior. I also don't know how the relationship would have been if he had come home that night and told me. You know, it was right at the end of our relationship. And I think it's normal to want to ask all these questions. When did you do it? How did you do it? Who's this person? And I went into that. And I was like, actually, I don't care. Like, I don't want to know. Like, and I was watching him like break down. And because I'd been in this space of doing my own work on myself, understanding kind of emotional regulation, you know, I was so at the beginning of all this kind of work, but I could still separate myself from what was happening. And I was like, why have you done this? Like, I don't understand. And now, and I think even at the same time, I was like, you hit the ultimate destructive button. Like, this happened when we were entering the good stage. Like, we'd gone through this portal of struggle, of not knowing how to communicate to each other, not feeling good within ourselves, to actually starting to feel good, starting to actually see physical growth and change within the relationship. We were more connected. We were starting to get more intimate. But what I didn't know about him was he was navigating so many layers of shame that had nothing to do with our relationship, so many layers of belief systems, so many layers of fear, essentially, of like, what are you scared of? But he's never done it to anybody else before. He had such strong opinions about people who did it because he's seen how it's broken people that he's loved, relationships. And he was so defiant of, I would never do that. This is something I would never do. And I do think this is the interesting thing around shame, is actually when we are so riddled with shame, we end up doing the thing that we say we'd never do.
Oh, 100%.
And we then, that individual goes on such an identity crisis of like, well, who the fuck am I? Because I've created this whole identity, even unconsciously, based on the things I said I would never do. But now I've done the thing that I said I would never do. So who am I? And that was his own journey that he needed to go on. And after he told me, we didn't speak. I was like, I respect you telling me. I understand that it's taken, you know, you have to take accountability. And thank God you have. Some of his family and friends were like, why tell her? And part of me, I feel, you know, there's an element of him. Oh, he needed to feel some form of relief by telling me.
Yeah.
But I also think for you, in order to grow, you have to take accountability. And you have to actually be honest with it.
Yeah.
And no one knew. And I think that's the thing, is so many people keep these things themselves because the shame just gets so overpowering. They don't know what to do and where to turn. And the fear of everyone else's judgment because of societal programming of once a cheat, always a cheat. If you're a cheater, you're the worst person in the world. It's the worst thing to do to someone. You're an awful human being. There is such a narrative around that I actually think pushes people further and further into isolation.
I 100% agree. And I think like that was my own experience. You know, it took me 2 years to tell my husband that I cheated on him. And because there is so much shame, not only from society, but also like to have to admit to somebody that you loved that you have done like one of the worst things that you can do to them is like, especially when you're the person that walks around saying, I would never do that. I can't believe people cheat. That's how I used to walk around. I had been so cheated on by the boyfriend before I was with my ex-husband that I was like, how could anybody do that? They are disgusting. That is disgusting behavior. You're a terrible person if you do that. I can't, but how would anybody do that to someone they loved? And so, yeah, it's this whole like dissolving of an identity that you've carried because you've done the thing that you said you were never going to do to somebody that you really love. Yeah. And I really understand that. And I think, you know, people told me, don't tell him. You don't need to tell him. Just forget about it. But I think that I know, and I'm so happy that Sam shared with you as well, because of obviously the journey that it took you down, the road it took you down. But I know that if I had swallowed that for the rest of my life, it would have made me sick.
Totally.
I mean, it was making me sick. It did start to show physically in my body. But, and it's not for everybody. But if you want to use infidelity as a way to really change your life for the better, you have to get radically honest.
Yeah.
And that means with yourself and with your partner. And I honestly, I know how terrifying that is. Oh my God, do I. It is not as simple. And if you are listening to this and you haven't shared yet with a partner, like, I really do understand the fear. I had to do a lot of work, just like Sam, actually. I already had to go on the journey of healing before I could tell my ex-husband, because it was so blocked, like stuck in my throat. I just didn't know what to do. I was so scared. So I really love that. So I'd love for you to share now. So obviously he'd shared with you this had happened. You'd lost your shit. You'd made the decision now to walk away again. So then how did the shift happen? How did the conversation then move from separation to healing and coming back together?
Okay, beautiful. And I really, before I go into that, what I really want to say is kind of caveat of what you just said there, of if we can use infidelity to actually heal from and grow from and change for the better, there is so much amazingness that's on the other side.
Oh my God,
But
yeah.
I understand the fear because there was more that I hadn't shared. But it's terrifying. Like, it's absolutely terrifying. And I think this is a thing of, because there is such a social and cultural belief around infidelity, I really believe that creates the lack of community. And because there is so much judgment, people are terrified to tell their bestest friends.
No.
Like, people are terrified to tell, like, who do you go to? Yeah. And if you're someone who maybe is new to therapy or new to coaching, where do you turn? And I think this is the thing that I really value a lot about myself, of when he told me, I knew it had nothing, I knew that it had nothing to do with what I looked like, what my body was like, how I performed sexually. Like, I think there is such a narrative around for other women of like, oh, but she's really pretty, or she's got a really good body, or she must be shit, she must be a shit lay, or all these different things that come into play. But because I'd done so much work already on myself, I could create a separation of like, oh, this has got nothing to do with what I look like.
Let's take a pause here. If you have cheated, whether it was a kiss, an affair, or even a connection you never told anyone about, and you're still carrying the shame, the guilt, and the story that you ruined everything, you don't have to keep holding that alone. Every other week, I host live 90-minute softening sessions on Zoom, which is a healing circle for women who have betrayed someone they love and broken their own heart in the process. We go to the root of what really happened, meet the part of you still holding pain, and begin releasing the shame that's been keeping you stuck. You'll feel lighter in your body, calmer in your heart, and more able to move forward with compassion for yourself. The link to join the next one is in the show notes. I would love to see you there.
100%. And the thing is that I really believe that infidelity really doesn't have anything to do with the other person.
No.
Like, it doesn't. Like, and I remember thinking, oh, when my ex-boyfriend cheated on me, oh, it must be because I'm, he prefers his ex, because he was cheating on, for 4 years, he was still sleeping with his ex-girlfriend, who, by the way, he'd cheated on to be with me. It was an absolute clusterfuck. But, that was like, he obviously had a thing with her that I was never going to be able to,
replace or even...
replace, exactly. And so it was like, but when I then cheated on my ex-husband, I realized it was nothing about him. It was nothing about him. I never wanted to, it was nothing about him. Like, I loved him. We had problems in our relationship, which I wasn't aware of. I felt very lonely in our relationship, but it wasn't about him. I didn't cheat with this other man because I thought that he was better than my husband. In fact, I could see very clearly he wasn't. Like, I was like, And so that's why it doesn't even make sense.
It doesn't compute.
It doesn't. You can't logically piece it together as to why did I do that with that person. Like, yeah.
And I think that's what creates the head fuck.
Yeah.
Both people who are involved, because it's so complex. It's not black and white. There is this huge grey area that, to be honest, when you're in the grey area, it's terrifying because there is no certainty. And as humans, we don't like uncertainty. So being in this space is so unsettling. And because it hits so many people's core wounding of being abandoned, of being not chosen, of being left. Like, it hits so many layers for a lot of us, men and women, that gets exposed. And it's terrifying. And I think for Sam and I, after this, he told me everything. I remember saying, because a part of me thought, maybe we'll get back together, maybe, this kind of elusive romantic idea that we were going to come back together, meet each other on a beach somewhere. And, this whole, I'm a Pisces, so I'm a dreamer. So if there's any like romantic dream, I was like, well, maybe this will work. And for me, it was crushing of like, it's full cutthroat. No, this is never happening. And I remember saying to him, like, that's it, never again. And we then said no contact. What else does talk about? The house is sold. We've got our money. There's nothing else. We have no responsibilities together now. There's no more ties. So we then went off, and when was it? So that was, I think it was 4 months later. I then went further into this work of like really looking at, for me, it really exposed my abandonment wound. Logically, I knew, my parents got divorced. My dad left the home. I have a great relationship with my dad now. But it's been so much work of me really looking at my father wound, my mother wound, my inner child. Like, where do I feel abandoned? Where do I feel unchosen? Where do I feel like this shit always happens to me? Where do I feel like that I've been abandoned? And there was no hiding when this all come to the surface. Like, I couldn't hide from it. It was so great and it was so shoved in my face. I felt that there was no other option other to look at it. So for me, I dove into that. Like, I joined more coaching programs. I did so much breath work of releasing so much trauma from my body. I had signed up to do ayahuasca, and this is a big part of the story, so I want to add it in now. I'd already booked ayahuasca, I think, at this point, or maybe just after, and I was going to be going in October, and this was May. And
for anyone doesn't know what ayahuasca is a plant medicine, so you want a psychedelic plant medicine. Okay, carry on.
A plant medicine journey that I'd kind of had the calling for the year before, and I was like, look, if it's meant to happen, it will come to me, which it did. And I'll recircle to that in a moment. But I then spent the next 4 months going on this whole journey. At the same time, Sam's doing the same. So he's got a coach. He's in. Yeah, sorry.
I just want to say, I absolutely love that you took this as an opportunity to go deeper within yourself, because so often what happens is the person that's cheated is the one that's like, I need to heal, I'm a terrible person, I can't, and they can use this as a way to connect back to themselves or a way to heal from the root. But I think oftentimes the person who was the one that was cheated on, it's almost like, oh, I don't need to look at myself because the other person is the bad person, they're the one that's done something wrong. But actually I love that you use this as a springboard, because actually, and I'm sure we'll get onto this, because cheating is a co-creation in our relationships. It doesn't stem from nowhere. It doesn't happen in a vacuum.
No.
So I just really want to I think
that's a great thing to add, because there was 2 reasons for me wanting to go in. There was a reason for myself. I was so angry to now have this identity associated to myself. I was so angry because I had built such an identity of like, this shit would never happen to me. Like, for anyone who kind of knows me prior to this work, of like, I had so many barriers up. Like, I did not have an open heart. I struggled immensely to be vulnerable. I didn't know how to let people in, but I very much did not believe that was how I was living my life. Like, I thought I was, super open, because I was very open. But the irony of like, just because you can articulate and you can talk a lot doesn't mean that you're being vulnerable. No one would see me in my emotions. No one would see me in my challenge. I had a strong identity of independent, strong woman. And to then all of a sudden have this identity of like, oh, you got cheated on. That for me made me so rageful that I was like, I don't fucking want this label. Like, I'm not having this label. And I think for me, if I hadn't have gone into myself to look at like, well, what does this mean? What am I making it mean? Because what does it mean if I carry this label? What does that even mean? So from like from a determination of not having that stuck on me, took me into the space, because I was so angry that this has happened to me, because I was always that person of like, once a cheat, always a cheat, out my life, no second chances, bam, full stop, you're done. I've always been like that. So this was a very big catalyst of growth for me, an identity shift, a complete crumbling and rebuilding. But then also because Sam and I, when he told me, and we ended up being, so he told me, and then the next day we ended up having a 5-hour FaceTime, and we spoke about so many things, and I couldn't ignore that I had a part to play. Like, it was frustrating. Like, don't get me wrong, it wasn't, a smooth conversation of being like, oh my God, poor Sam, I'm sorry that I did this. There was definitely moments of shouting and rage and all of the emotions, because you're human and you're in pain and you've been hurt. But actually giving him space to share his side, I was like, oh, I'm not here with my shiny halo. And I can't hide that I've had a part to play in this. And because I was already in this world where, having honest reflections from other coaches and other therapists, as much as it's so fucking difficult to have it said back to you, having someone say, like, you played a role is so confronting. And you either go in to look at why, or you shut it down. Yeah. And you do that. And, at the end of the day, I respect either of your choices, because it's your choice. I do believe that at some point it will come out. Maybe it will come out in 20 years' time, 15 years' time, 30 years' time, whatever. Maybe it will never come out in the physical words, but it will come out in illness, it will come out in resentment, it will come out in shutdown, dissociation, it will come out in some form. And I didn't want that to be my story. So that is really the catalyst, kind of these two angles that I was like, nope, I've got to look at this. So
what was it that, I'd love you to share, like, what was it that you started to see was your part in the co-creation of this?
One of how his opinion on the relationship. So I had my own view of why I thought the relationship wasn't working, why I thought we weren't right for each other. He was shut off, he wasn't connected with his emotions, he wouldn't talk to me, he was avoidant. Like, I kind of had these pieces, but at the same time I wasn't seeing that, oh, I was really needy, I was really anxious, I was really insecure. Like, I hadn't seen the lens of what he could see. And although it's challenging, at the same time, there's two truths. He's got his view, I've got my view. And mine's right and his is right. And at the same time, to add another complexity, they're both wrong.
Yeah.
I've got my view of him, and it's all through my lens. And he's got his view of me all through his lens. And there were so many elements that I think had got us to that stage where I was being so brutally honest and having complete disregard for him and his feelings. I want this to change, you're not doing this, like, why aren't you like, it was all about me in a big, and that was a real big eye-opener, because again I was looking at all these pieces online of like, share your desires, stand up for your truth, speak your mind, like, being that energy, ask for what you want. But again, I didn't know the basics or the foundations of how to do it. It was still done through my old paradigm of essentially, you're not enough. Yes. You need to step up, and you're not stepping up. Then I started learning about masculine and feminine energy, and then I'm like, you're in your unhealthy masculine, you're not leading, you're not taking charge. Like, I was very much in this space and thinking that, I'm doing all the work. And because I was doing so much work on myself, unconsciously I was wearing this badge of honor of like, I'm actually better than you because I'm doing all this work and you're not. Even though I was saying the words, how I'm showing up in the relationship was that. Like, I'm better than you because I'm doing this work and you're not. And we see it, you know, we see it in people in our realm, like people who are like, you know, people think, you know, even in the spiritual community or the personal development community, there are still people that wear or show up in that space of thinking that they're better than you because they've done more fucking plant medicine journeys than you, or because they've sat in more breath work than you, or they've done more work than you. But it doesn't mean shit at the end of the day. No one's better than each other. And if you think you're better than someone else, you're missing the whole point of being on a spiritual path.
Yeah. And also, what I love is that it was absolutely feeding into his already deep experience of shame.
Yeah. And I was just shaming him even more and pushing him further and further and further away. But what I thought I was doing was calling him forward, and I wasn't. I was pushing him further away. And I don't have the same childhood as him. I don't have the same experiences of him. And there is no one, I've never met someone more strong in a man, in a human. Like, I adore Sam to my core. And I remember finding that really challenging, because even though he'd cheated on me, I remember saying to my friends and my family, I love him as a human being. Like, aside of the mistake that he's made, as a human being, I absolutely adore him. So I don't want him to suffer. I don't want him to, you know, he's a beautiful man. He's so kind. He's so generous. His heart is on his sleeve. Like, he will support you. He will hold space for you. Like, he's a beautiful human. But I think what's so important to remember is it takes two people to make a relationship work, and it takes two people to make a relationship break down. And it's so easy for us to point the finger. So easy for us to point the finger because it takes the blame off of us, and that feels so much better.
Yeah.
And, you know, we had taken this space apart, and I think because outside of the romantic connection I had with Sam, like I just said, I loved him as a human being. I respected him as a human being. And I saw as a mistake. And something that was really beneficial for me was, my dad's a therapist. And I remember saying to him, Sam cheated on me. I just found out. And I remember he was like, fuck, how are you doing? And I was like, I'm devastated. Like, I'm so upset. And I explained, you know, the conversation that we'd had. And he said, Jess, not devaluing your experience, but this is classic sabotage 101. The person cheats on the person they love. And I was like, no, they don't. And he was like, they do. It's terrifying. People are absolutely petrified of intimacy, that they don't even realise that they're petrified of intimacy. Mm-hmm. So they do the things that get them out of it. And one thing that I really realised, especially when it comes to shame, especially when it comes to disconnection, especially when it comes to protecting ourselves, because we will do whatever we can do in order to protect ourselves. We all have the part of us that can sabotage. We all have the part of us that can lie. We all have the part of us that will protect ourselves at all costs. And it's done an incredible job to get us to where we are now. Otherwise, we wouldn't be here. So I respect the part of me that comes in to protect. I respect the part of Sam that comes in to protect.
I mean, I'll just share that was also my experience too. And I didn't realize I was afraid of intimacy. In fact, I thought I was Little Miss Intimate. Like, I had 3 long-term relationships. I lived with all of them. Like, I was like, I'm so open and so open-hearted and so willing to love and be loved and be seen. And it wasn't the truth. And although I don't necessarily think I was, I think I sabotaged it for other reasons, but it is, you're absolutely right. The protector parts that come up, the parts of us that don't know how to actually say what's really going on for us. It's like this behavior, because people always say to me on Instagram, you should have just told him, you should have just left him, you should have, like, of course, the logical mind says that. But it's like, sometimes we don't even know what we're doing. And it's like, I can't even understand what's happening. I don't even understand why this is happening right now in my relationship. It wasn't like it's got so bad that I need to have a conversation about it. I didn't know how bad it was. I didn't know how bad my internal experience was. I didn't know how lonely I felt in my relationship. I didn't know all of these things. And so, yeah, these parts come up and we behave in ways that don't feel in alignment with our values or aren't in alignment with our values, and that's why that doesn't make sense. And yet, as you say, they are protector parts in some way, or they're a part of us that is screaming out to be seen or heard, or a soul's cry from a part of us that we've buried for years and years and years because it hasn't been safe for it to be seen.
Completely.
So, yeah.
For some people, like everything you've just explained there, it's so deep rooted. The shame is so deep rooted that it's actually become a part of them and they don't know what to do about it. The fear is so much a part of them. And for Sam, you know, one outlet is gambling. People go so deep into gambling. Some people go so deep into drug and alcohol use. Another one is work. Like, people throw themselves so deep into work because they can't bear to come home and deal with what is happening at home.
Yes, and you know what? These are all forms of betrayal in relationship.
It's connection and avoidance. So it's not actually about the outlet. It's about what is causing the outlet. And I think when we put so much emphasis on the outcome, we miss the process or the journey of what that got them to what got them there. And it does take to. And I think that's the hard part. And I think I really want to preface that I don't know if this was 2 years prior, if I could have held this. I don't know. I don't know if I could have held it if he told me the same day.
Yeah.
I don't know. I don't believe that was part of our experience. I don't believe that. I just have to trust that whatever happened, happened. I was still carrying this identity of like, I would never get back with someone who would cheat on me. Never. And then months went by. I was actually at a retreat myself and I was in a breathwork practice and my whole intention was finally releasing any final connection. And the only way I can describe it is like a full physical body release that I come out of this practice and I was like, I'm done. I'm over him. Like I moved on. Like I've spent months and months and months going freaking balls deep into healing, getting over this. And then I come out of the retreat. I was doing no phones when I was on the retreat, and I come out and he'd messaged me, and I was like, wow, interesting. And when I'd looked at the time, he'd messaged me at the time I was actually in that breath work.
Wow.
And he was like, look, I just want to reach out. I've been doing a lot of work and I would really like to have another conversation with you if you'd be open. And because I was going to ayahuasca 2 months later, going to Costa Rica to do ayahuasca, things started to click even more of, oh my God, I do have a massive part to play in this breakdown of the relationship. And I then messaged and said, look, how would you feel to meet up for coffee and go and we have a chat? And he was like, yes, I would love that. I was like, okay, we're going to have a phone call first. We had a phone call. And I said, what's your intention? Like, what do you want to meet up for? Like, I've got nothing else really to talk about. And he was like, look, I'm just going to put it out there. I'm still in love with you. I've been in love with you since we've been together, like at the time, 4 years ago. We've now been together 6 years. So yeah, at the time it was 4 years. And he said, I've done so much work on myself and I just want to speak to you. I just want to see if there is a chance, if anything. And I was like, look, I'm happy to talk to you, but full disclosure, I'm not even saying a yes or a no to that. Like when he turned up at the door, I opened my front door and there he was in front of me. And I felt so guilty, I think is the right way. And the reason for it was, here was this man who I'd been in a relationship with for nearly 4 years, who looked so different. He looked so happy. He looked so healthy. And then he came in and then I just cried. I just couldn't stop crying. And he was like, what are you crying about? And I said, looking at you. And for instance, for so much of our relationship, Sam had said he wanted to shave his head. And I had said, no, you can't do that. Don't do that. You'll look ugly. He then also said he wanted to get his nose pierced. I was like, don't do that. He also, from the get-go when I met him, he said he wanted to be covered in tattoos. I was so judgmental about the whole thing. And I was like, you can't do that. You know, that's not fair. I made it all about me. And then all of a sudden, here is this guy I've not seen for 9 months. He has his head shaved, he's got his nose pierced, and he's got his whole front tattooed, his whole leg tattooed, and he's starting his back tattoo. And for me, the first thing that come forward was, I kept you small. That was the thing that really stood out. And it was that, we laugh about it now, because like, you had the classic, you know, chick flick, full like makeover. Like, you get your hair cut, you get your hair dyed, you get new clothes.
Yeah.
And I was like, that was you. And I said, why? Like, and even from the movies, why do they do it? Because they're actually connecting to their identity. They're connected to who they are. And what I realised was that it was me that kept him in a box of the restriction. I wouldn't allow him to be himself. And it was all because of me. All because I was like, don't shave your head, don't get your nose pierced, don't get tattoos. There wasn't really a reason, but it was my underlining thing of control.
Yes.
And I realised, and that's where I was so upset with myself. And again, it was like a massive mirror in front of me that I couldn't hide from, of like, oh my goodness, I really squashed you, and I didn't even realize that I was squashing you. And it wasn't until the breakup that you started this whole journey on self-expression, healing so many parts of you, that you connected to your authenticity. And by that, it came out in the physical expression of his hair, his nose piercing, his tattoos, even the outfits that he was wearing. And God, that broke me. And although I already was starting to see that I had parts to play, that was really obvious. And one thing that was really interesting was that I think we spent 3 or 4 days together. I was so ill. Like, I was so ill. And I remember my dad saying to me, it's interesting because you have no energy to fight. You're being forced to surrender because you're so unwell. Like, I mean, I was literally bedbound for like a day and a half.
Wow.
And bless him, he was looking after me and everything. And then we started to have these conversations. And one thing I think is so important to add to this conversation is, this whole time, it was all around the fact that Sam had cheated on me.
Mm-hmm.
And I knew that I was keeping something. I say I know, I didn't want to look at it. So I just pretended it didn't exist. And basically, there was a guy that I worked with, and prior to Sam and I being in a relationship together, he told me that he wanted to be in a relationship with me, that he was in love with me. We'd kissed a couple of times on nights out, but nothing had ever happened further than the kiss. And
when you were with Sam?
No, this happened before I was with Sam.
Right.
Literally just before me and Sam really like became a couple. And me and him stayed friends. Me and this guy stayed friends. And Sam had asked me multiple times throughout our relationship, has anything ever happened with you two? And I said, no, nothing ever happened. I completely denied it for my reason of like, why tell him? Like, it's before you come along. But what would happen is, anytime I come back to London, because he was still in the same company that I worked for, and we all kind of shared the same friendship group, we would all go out, we'd have drinks, and the same thing would always happen. The guy would tell me that he was still in love with me, that he thought I was beautiful, all these kind of things. And I would never shut it down. Or if I did, it was very like loosely, because there was a part of me that was getting so much validation by the fact that this other guy liked me. And I never said anything. But he'd asked me multiple times. I'm telling, at least 10 times in these like 3.5 years that we were together. And I never admitted it. And it wasn't until he came down and we said, look, he basically was like, Jess, I'm still in love with you. Like, I want to give this another go. I really feel like we have the potential to make this relationship work. But everything has to be on the table. Like, we have to clear everything. And I was like, yeah, cool, everything on the table. Let's get everything on the table. So I basically put metaphorically, I put everything on the table except this. Yeah. So I was like, no, I'm not ready. I can't put it on the table. And he put, everything. He laid everything out. And it was so confronting. It was so challenging. Even the stuff that I'd laid out already was hard. And he'd asked me right at the end, before he was getting the train home, has anything ever happened? He was like, I'm going to ask you another time. And I felt felt like I couldn't lie. I was like, we've come this far. And I said, like, oh, you know, he's told me that he, you know, we kissed before we got together. And I was also petrified to actually look at the fact that I'd also cheated in some capacity.
Yes, I think that's so interesting, because I think, and thank you for bringing this in, because I think so many times when our partner cheats on us in a big way, in a very obvious way, it completely overshadows any time in which we may have done something that is potentially also not, it's not a healthy way to be. Yeah, it's what?
It's not loyal.
It's not
You're
loyal.
lying.
Exactly.
Yeah,
There's
you're
lies.
hiding.
There's hiding. There's things which you know are inappropriate, which is why you're not sharing it. And it doesn't take away what, you know, what the other person has done.
No, not
But
at all.
I really do believe, and we touched on this earlier as well, there are lots of little points of betrayal that happen in these relationships, which we ignore because they aren't the big ones, because somebody hasn't slept with somebody else, somebody hasn't had an emotional affair with somebody else, somebody hasn't had a full-blown, you know, one night stand with somebody else, but
Or
there's
like a
these,
long affair. Yeah,
or
yeah.
a long affair. It's like we will continuously work late, we will continuously tell a lie about something that's happened in the relationship, we will hide things, we will start drinking more, you know, all of these things are betrayals. And it does not, I want to be clear, I'm not excusing the behavior of the person that has cheated in a big way, but I think it's really important to notice all these small points that happen along the way, and it's not just, again, doesn't just happen in a vacuum.
Completely.
So I'd love to hear how you moved from, so you were here, you chose to give it another go. And so what I'd love is for us to talk about, how did you move through this? Now you've decided to get back together. How did you actually heal from the fact that he had cheated on you?
Okay. Firstly, I just want to revisit what you just said there. Is like, we all have, not we all, looking at, right, where have we done these micro breaks of trust? Because one of the things I really want to say is, like, I had justified my actions so bloody hard that I was disconnected with the fact that it could have been betrayal.
Yeah.
I was so disconnected, and I refused to look at it, because it meant I had to take radical responsibility and accountability for this part of me. And although I had such an identity of I would never get back with someone who cheated, I also had such a strong identity that I would never do it. This is where it come to such a shock to me. But he was like, this is run for our whole relationship. So he was like, not that they're any worse than each other, but your lies run for 4 years. And I found it so hard to sit with that, and to actually sit with that part of me that had done it. And that's what I really wanted to reference, that, because there'll be so many, when I started sharing this part of my story, the amount of women that messaged me, and I mean a lot of people that I knew, that I didn't know, that followed me, that messaged and said, shit, I've done this. Or I've had an emotional relationship with a guy at work, and I know it's inappropriate, but it's not quite crossed the physical line. You still know it's inappropriate, and you still know, if you really were honest with yourself, if your partner did that to you, how would you feel? And what category would you put that in? Because I would argue that so many people would put that in the category of cheating if it was reversed.
And I think that there's what we forget when we come into a relationship, because no one ever teaches us this, is we have to build a wall around our relationship. Like, this is, like, nothing is penetrating this.
No, it's like your couple bubble. You create this couple bubble between the two of you.
Yeah, exactly. And when we do these little micro cheating things, which we and I did these in my relationship, even my ex-husband admitted to doing them as well. We justify it. We don't think it's that bad. We're not messaging that person all the time, or we're not actually having an affair. We haven't actually kissed them, but there are moments that we have not shared with our partner because we know that broke the sanctity of the relationship. And it's like, we have to actually say, like, no.
Like, when you say about me and Sam repairing our relationship, this particular conversation, this topic was massive for me. I had so much of my worth put in what I looked like and how other men saw me.
Yes.
So I really had to look at this part, and I really, honestly, full hand on heart to any other woman who feels this way. And when I started bringing this to the conversation, even in when my in-person events, even with my own friendship group, so many of us were like, oh shit, I didn't even realize that was a thing. And I think this is the thing, is that we don't realize all of these things are actually happening below the surface because we're not really talking about it. And this is the thing, when it comes to Sam and I repairing our relationship, one, we had to both take radical responsibility. Like, I mean, everything on the table, which was absolutely petrifying, because you realise you're putting everything at risk. Because by this point, seeing him, being with each other, just being in each other's energy, each other's company, literally the simplicity of having a conversation, I realised, oh my God, I actually am in love with you. Like, I am in love with you and he's in love with me. So you already realise the magnitude of what you're going to have to do. So you already realise the risk. And this is why I think so many people lie about things and push things under the rug, is because it's so risky.
Yeah.
But really, if your relationship is built off solid ground and built off a solid foundation, which mine and Sam's was not, and we were trying to create, we were trying to create that at the time, we have to be honest. Because if you're not able to bring these kind of conversations to the table, then how do you really know if you've got the stable relationship? You don't really feel safe because you don't feel safe enough to bring these conversations to the table. And
exactly. I love that. I just want to share with you what you just said there about having foundations, because that was exactly the same issue with me and my ex-husband. Is when it came down to it, our relationship was built on sand. It was
totally.
not built on solid truth, foundations of understanding of it ourselves, let alone each other, of emotional intimacy, of, there were so many things that were lacking. On the surface it was great,
Yeah.
but there were so many things that were lacking underneath. And as you say, if you have that solid foundation, you will be able to share truth with each
and
other.
it doesn't, again, it's not going to be easy.
No.
Like, being honest, sometimes is easy, but when you're actually bringing things that you're like, I've made a mistake here, like, you feel it. And I think for a lot of people, you probably go back to being a child or being told off by your parents of like, fuck, I'm actually about to be in shit here. And people don't like that feeling, and that's completely understandable. I hated that feeling, and I'm not saying that I like it now, but you kind of do, and create, because you create the foundations and you create the safety, you create clear boundaries of what's acceptable, what's not acceptable. Also, that builds the safety. But when you actually both make an honour and a commitment to devote to this relationship and to stay committed to the relationship, you're less likely to make these bigger mistakes. And even if you do, you can still come to the relationship, but you have to it's risky.
Yeah.
Because what you're going to lose. And I think this is the thing with a lot of people of, what am I prepared to lose? And I think that is why so many people keep things under the rug, but actually it comes out in so many other ways. Resentment. That is the biggest killer of most relationships, is resentment. Yeah. You resent the other person, you end up disliking them, you treat each other like shit, you talk to each other like shit, you're not connected, you're not intimate with each other, and that's actually what breaks the relationship down. But the resentment doesn't come out of nowhere. It's what creates the resentment. And that's what me and Sam had come to realise of, like, we decided to get back together, everything on the table. I was then going to Costa Rica to do ayahuasca, and I said to him, look, I want to sit with this plant medicine, and I want to bring all of this to the plant medicine and see what is here. And first ceremony I went into, I'd never done plant medicine before. And for those of you who don't know, the way in which they were described, the way in which I was described ayahuasca more so, was that it will be a loving mirror. It will show you everything of where you are not honouring your truth, where you are not showing up, where you are out of alignment, where you are not in integrity. It will show you all of these pieces, but through the lens of love. And my intention was, my first question to the plant medicine was, are Sam and I supposed to be together? And the journey initially showed me a life without him, and it showed me a life with him. And the life without him was dark, cold. I was terrified. And then it showed me a life with him. But didn't mean that that was the right, that's the decision because ayahuasca's told me to do it. It was still a choice. You know, do I still choose to do this work? Because even the plant said to me of like, and I say the plant said to me, my friends always laugh when I say that, but like the message that I got from that ceremony was, if you want this to work, you're going to have to put in the work. And I remember we'd said no contact when I was on the retreat because I didn't want to be on my phone. And then I landed in London, I booked a flight straight to Edinburgh, and I got a taxi to his house. And I was like, let's do it. Let's make this work. Let's do this work. And me and Sam both laughed now and said, if we knew what we were coming up against, I don't know if we would have been like, yeah, fuck it, let's do it. So he came and moved in with me. And we got to the point, for the first 4 months, we noticed honeymoon season again. It was so nice to be back with each other. It was so beautiful. We were in this whole like lush honeymoon phase again. And then we started to see it. I was like, I can see the comments. I can see the disconnection. I can see where we're turning away when we need to be leaning in. I can see where it was coming again. But because we'd had all of this awareness, and we'd literally seen it happen in our past relationship, it was like you were seeing it on a conveyor belt coming towards you. Like, if we don't sort this out, we're going to be in exactly the same position. And this is a thing of like, we're not taught these things. I mean, some are. I certainly wasn't. He certainly wasn't. And you only know what you know. And that's what we said, like, we have to get support. Like, we have to have a third person to come in and look at this dynamic. And even in this time, to add, we were both still doing self stuff. I was still working with a coach. He was still working with a coach, because we needed that. I needed a place for, also, caveat on this as well, I didn't realise how much I was relying on Sam to be my emotional support. He was like, I'd put so much emphasis of him being everything for me, that then that's where there was no space, because he couldn't then come to me because I was taking up all the space. So I had to get outside support. So, you know, friends were great, but one thing I really want to say when you're repairing your relationship is be mindful of who you go to and be mindful of who you ask support from. Because some people will not agree with getting back with an ex-partner. Some people will have very firm opinions. Some people will give you so much unsolicited advice that actually can create a lot of damage. So yes, you're creating your bubble, you're creating the walls around you. You need support, you need community. You cannot do it on your own, but be careful of who you ask. And this is where I was so conscious about going to people who had walked this path. You know, women coming to you because you've been the one that has cheated in the relationship, because you've actually walked the path.
Yeah.
Women coming to me of being like, I don't know what to do. I feel like I either want to cheat, or I feel like I've been cheated on. I don't know how to repair this relationship, or I can feel me and my partner drifting. I feel insecure, like I need something. But be careful of who you ask, because that is going to really, that will either grow and nourish everything that you're building, or it will poison everything that you're building.
I absolutely agree, because every single person is looking through their own lens and their own pain. And so it's like, it's a very challenge, because it's a time where you do want to ask all your friends, what do you think I should do? Do you think I should do this? Do you think I should tell them? Do you think I da? Because we're desperately looking for the answers outside of us. But actually, yeah, I really agree. Get professional help, get coaches, get therapists, get somebody. And I love the fact that you guys stepped into doing the relationship work together, because I do really believe that to heal from infidelity as a couple, like, I do know people that have done it without having outside, like a third party, but I would say I really recommend it. So tell us what so you had a coach, you had a relationship
We had
coach that you both worked with.
we've got a couple more sessions. We're working with her for over a year now. And one of the things I really wanted to share, which come to such a surprise to both Sam and I, was by session 2 or 3, we realised this had nothing to do with infidelity. And I was incredibly surprised, because I was like, he's cheating on me, this is why we're here, this is what's fucked the relationship. He was kind of in the same position. And then actually when we started to peel back the layers, literally by session 3, I was like, that was the outcome of everything else that was already there. And because we'd seen it, like I said, coming on a conveyor belt, I could already see it. And previously that had come probably early days, hadn't acknowledged it. 3 years later, we're then in this position.
Yes.
And now, obviously, getting support, so much of it was around looking at my inner child, looking at his inner child, looking at what got us here, looking at what was a priority in our relationship, building the foundations. Because again, we were also built on sand. You know, we were trying to build a bloody convertible. We were trying to build like a fucking conversion roof on the top of a house that was built on sand. And the thing is, there is such an illusion of so many people thinking it's the external factors. You know, let's go on holiday, let's buy more clothes, let's get a brand new car, let's have a baby, let's do these things, because we think that they're the missing piece to why we're feeling a certain way in the relationship, and it isn't. And again, one thing that was really interesting, it was great that we had the couple support, but why we still continued with the self-support is because so much of what we were bringing, we realised had nothing to do with the other person. Like, so much of my wounding about my inner child had nothing to do with Sam, but he was mirroring this for me to look at, and vice versa. I had such a distorted relationship with men, and he actually had such a distorted relationship with women. And obviously we're both dating the opposite sex. So we're mirroring all of this wounding, and it's so difficult to disconnect the partner out of that, because you think, well, it's your fault. You know, I'm like this, or I react in this way because you're doing X, Y, Z. And actually, when you start to remove that narrative, you start to see, it's actually not about them. It's actually about me. And yes, there were basic things that we had to learn, like how to communicate, how to navigate when we get triggered, how to prioritize certain things in our relationships, you know, relationship check-ins, having moments where we actually prioritize it. And I think this is the piece of, like, when you're looking at like business, if someone's growing their business, and me and Sam are both in this stage of growing our businesses, I put every piece of my energy and effort into getting my business off of the ground. Had I done that for the relationship? No. So now I was in a position of, like, if I want this to work, I'm going to have to work at it. No different of any other scenario.
And sorry to interrupt, but I also want to say this is so common, is that just because as humans we know how to love, because we understand the experience of love in our bodies and the feeling of love, we assume that we know how to be in relationship.
Yeah.
And we do not have a fucking clue how to be in a relationship, because we've only learned from our parents or books or media or whatever it is. And they are terrible teachers, because they never teach us how to have healthy relationships. So I love that. So what was it that you discovered in your inner child, or what was it that you discovered was the root of what was really going on? Or did you discover what was the root?
I think there were multiple routes. One route for me, I had such a fear of abandonment, such a fear of being left, that I actually kept everyone at arm's length. I was terrified of intimacy, because what if I put everything on the table? What if you see me for everything that I am? All the parts of me, not just the parts that I want to curate to be likable and AKA perfect. What if I show you the other parts? And what if you don't like them? And what if you leave me because of them? Then what do I do? Like, absolutely petrified. And I want to really emphasize, I had no idea of this. Like, I had no idea that I was scared of intimacy, because I craved it. I craved and I longed to have this kind of relationship, but I was the one that was stopping me from even having it.
Yeah.
I was so terrified, but I didn't realise I was so terrified. That's the paradox. It's like your actions are a result of your fear. And all of these parts of me, you know, I think there is that part of, like, you know, a lot of us, or a lot of women, can understand, like, when you start dating, you know, you only ever meet up with a guy when you've got makeup on, when your hair's done, your legs are always shaved, your vagina's always shaved, like, you're always like in this aesthetic when you're in the dating season. Then you start to get more comfortable, you show up in like joggers, your hair's not all done, then you start to not wear makeup, then you start to express this other part of you. But it takes time, because at the beginning, what are we doing? We're wooing them. And the guys are doing the same thing, you know, they're wearing their best clothes, they're putting on their best outfits, they're putting out all the stops. We all do it. And then slowly but surely we start to show other sides of us. But actually, outside of the outside world, i.e. what we look like, what we're wearing, You have the other versions. You know, the version of me that is rude, the version of me that does get angry, the version of me that is sad, the version of me that is scared, the version of me that doesn't give a shit, like all these other versions, the version of me that's terrified. We somehow don't feel that they're worthy enough to show, or we're
Yeah.
scared to show because we're so protective of them, because I don't want this part of me to get hurt. You know, if you think of it from a child, if you think that someone's going to hurt your child, you're going to fucking protect that child at all costs.
Yeah.
You're going to not put that child in harm's way purposely. And that's no different from you and your inner child. Like if 7-year-old you got hurt, or for me, instance, when the divorce happened, 9-year-old, 10-year-old me, realizing, shit, you can just leave. Oh my goodness, what just happened? Like my whole world has crumbled. Like that's who I'm working with. It's her that's scared. So adult me, like empowered me, knows in my core, if he leaves, I'll survive. Like I'll be okay. But actually child me is petrified of being left
Yes.
and not being good enough. And that for me was a big root cause of how I was showing up. I definitely identify with having the anxious attachment of like wanting to be attached, wanting to be validated, wanting to be needed, wanting to be found attractive, putting so much of my worth in what I look like. Really also having the identity of feeling that I gain love from giving sex. So that was a huge part of my own healing, of where I thought, oh, they're only going to love me for a certain amount of time if I keep giving them sex. And that's been a huge part of my own journey. But these were core roots that I was bringing. He was bringing his own, like layers of shame, like fears of relationship, fears of things not working out, fears of showing all of his parts. And really what it's about is like not just being physically naked, but theoretically naked in front of someone, like taking all your masks off and being like, this is me, take it or leave it. And both people are terrified. And I think that's what we miss, is like, we're terrified that we get so consumed by our own fear that we forget that they're also fucking terrified. And actually you've got two adults that are also bringing their inner childs to the table. They're bringing all the pain that they're carrying, their wounding that they're carrying, their own trauma, and they're doing the best that they can with the knowledge and the support that they have. And unfortunately, they're going to hurt other people. And the more we take responsibility and learn to love these parts, the more we can actually limit how much we hurt others, because hurt people. And unfortunately, that is true. So when we started to realise all of these layers, and actually something that was so powerful was seeing both of us in practice together. So when she would take me into my inner child, and he would hold the space, he would witness me, like terrifying but so powerful, vice versa. That was the intimacy, because to me, intimacy always meant sex.
Yes.
And all of a sudden we get into deeper layers of intimacy, of emotional intimacy, like real deep rooted intimacy of being able to trust and rely and be with that person in all of my entirety. Can I express my rage around this person? Maybe not directly at him, but can I express my rage? Can I express my sexual side? Can I express my sadness? Can I express all these parts of me? And do I feel safe to do so? And really, you need to feel safe in yourself first, because what I realised in the previous relationship is I was wanting him to hold the space for me and me take no responsibility to hold myself, because I didn't even know what that even fucking meant. I didn't know what that meant. It wasn't until I started doing this work for myself to actually train in it so I could learn how to hold other people through it, was I then understanding what it meant to hold myself in my rage, to hold myself in my sadness, to hold myself in my triggers. Because if I can hold myself, I'm not giving all of my power away to my partner to be like, hey, come and save me, because I don't know what to do. You know, I'm creating that safety for me to do it, and also for them to do it for themselves too. And what I've realised from us being on this journey of repair, it was so challenging. Like the first couple of months, like we would have open conversations of like, do you think this is worth it? Like, this is too hard. Like, I don't know if I can do this anymore. Like, it was pulling up so much of our pain that it was so unenjoyable.
Yeah, I mean, I completely relate to that. Like when I was trying to work it through with my ex-husband, that period is so unbelievably painful. Like
It's just shit.
Oh my God, it's so shit. Like when people message me now and they're in that part and they're trying to heal after the rupture.
Yeah.
Like I remember that. I
Yeah.
couldn't walk into a room with, if we were both in a room together, the chances are one of us would be triggered within 5 seconds of being
Yeah.
in the room with each other. Like we couldn't have a conversation. We would like, it was so challenging. We were having couples therapy as well as having individual support as well, just like you guys did.
Yeah.
I really just want to say, like, if you're in that bit right now, I get it, and so does Jess. Like,
So hard.
it's so hard,
And
and also,
sorry, you go.
pardon, what do you
No,
say?
you go. I was going to say so. You go.
It's so hard, and but also it's not going to last forever.
Yeah.
And whatever happens, whether or not you stay together like Jess and Sam, or you break up like me and my ex-husband, like right now you have to let go of the future. You have to let go of whatever the outcome is, and just know that if you believe it's worthwhile right now, if you still love this person, then just keep showing up for yourself, keep showing up for them, keep showing up for the relationship, and at some point there will be a moment of shift or a decision. And I'd love to hear from you, just where you felt that shift, where that moment was where you were just like, actually, you know what, I really feel like we love each other more deeply now than we did before.
I remember distinctively doing a practice in our coaching, and we come off of the call and we both were just sobbing. And I said to him, how do you know this is what you want? How do you know it's me? And he said, he was like, I can't imagine a life without you. Like, I cannot imagine you not being in my life. And he said, why me? And I basically said the same thing. But I said, I don't know how to explain it other than there is something in my body that says if I don't do this, I'll regret it. The regret of not trying was larger than walking away. And I remember distinctively saying to Sam early on, isn't this the easier option? Isn't it just the easier option to go back to your ex? And he was like, babe, I don't think so. I think this is the fucking hardest thing we're going to do. And this was right at the beginning that we'd started. And I was like, no, this is the easy option. People are going to think that I'm weak. People are going to think I was so in this.
Yeah.
And then when I was in it, I was thinking, hell no, this is not for the weak. This is not for the faint-hearted. And what I actually found really relieving is at one point I said to him, I don't know if I can do this anymore. Babe, I'm really struggling. Like, this is really hard. We were having weekly calls and I was doing my own work. He was in his own work. Like, we were in the absolute fucking trenches. We were pulling everything apart. So there was no hiding. There was literally no stone going unturned. And it was just so confronting and really painful. And I said, I don't know if I can do this anymore. And I'm scared that you don't feel that way. And he was like, babe, I feel the same. And even just hear, you know, most people aren't like, oh, I want to hear that. But even just hearing that I'm not taking the full load of like, I don't know if I can do this anymore, was enough to actually keep me in.
Yeah.
Because it was enough to be like, oh, it's not just hard for me. We're both finding this hard because we're both having to pull up all of these things from like, we're pulling stuff up from when we were 8 years old.
Yeah.
I mean, we met in our 20s. Like, we're not around in these eras. And it's so difficult. But what I realised was, like, we continued with the coach. So we worked with her for 6 months. We continued for another 6 months. And she gave us the feedback form of, like, right, what do you think's changed? And I distinctively remember being in the kitchen and Sam was like, nothing's changed. And I burst out laughing. I said, don't be so dramatic. You know as well as I do, things have changed. And he was like, right. And he was laughing. And I said, look, we'd had an argument the day before. So we were like, look, we're both still in this space. And he was like, what have you written about what's changed? And I said, our emotional intimacy. And he was like, what do you mean? And I explained what the emotional intimacy was we now, it's like we connect beyond words. And what I realised was that's what I'd always wanted. Like, I wanted this feeling of like, they get me, they know me, because I always carry this identity of like, no one really knows me. But that's because I wasn't really showing them any. I wasn't really showing people me,
Or
and he
you didn't know who you
who
were.
I was.
Yeah.
All I knew was that I was keeping some of these pieces tucked away of like, can't show that, can't say
Yeah.
that, can't do that, and I didn't really know who I was. And one thing that I think is really important to note for most couples is the way we articulate things in our language, because not just because of Sam's upbringing and his environment, but like we talk about it a lot of, and he now works with men. He's now a men's coach, like he trained in that as well to help men on this journey. But he also works and does talks around mental health for men in construction, because he used to work in construction. And he would say, like, I don't understand your language. Like, I don't understand what you mean by emotional intimacy. I don't understand what you mean by these things. And I often feel like that is the case in a lot of people's relationships. Not necessarily it's always the guy. It can be either or. But I generally think in every relationship, there is one person that doesn't actually know or have the words to describe how they feel. And this is something that we really realised in our relationship, was that I was much more articulate in what I could feel. Because it's much more socially acceptable for women to be able to express their feelings.
Yeah, well, and also I think we're just much more connected to our feelings than men are. Like we're much more like, I mean, I wasn't really, but I was also at the same time.
Yeah, I would say I was and I wasn't. But I think
Yeah.
it's socially acceptable. Like we're
Yeah.
taught also that because we're women and in a number of ways. But there are also many women that will be like, I'm not connected to that because I don't feel like I was. And Sam's like, I don't have the language for it. So one thing that really shifted was actually me seeing that. He doesn't, it's not that he doesn't care. It's not that he's not interested. It's not that he doesn't know what he knows. He doesn't know what he's feeling. He just needs time to actually figure out how to articulate it. Like what I think a lot of men say, I'm angry or I feel angry. I think they go to anger more than they go to sadness. And I feel like for women, it varies, but I would say we probably go to sadness and anger quite, similarly. But I think for a lot of men, it's like, right, but what do I actually feel? Do I feel shame? Do I even know what shame feels like? Like when someone says, you feel shame about that? I don't know. What the fuck does shame feel like?
Yeah.
Do I feel upset by that? I don't know. I feel pissed off. Okay, right, let's look at that. And the more we were in this space together, the more I started to realise, we don't operate the same. And I'm trying to meet him as me. And that was a huge, massive shift in our relationship of like, he just needs a bit of space to kind of feel into what he's feeling. Or I word things in a different way.
Yes.
And I think that's what's really interesting is that, and something that we learned so much of that we're just different people. We process differently. We learn differently. And being able to come back, like the repair, being able to just come back at any point, because it's not that we don't argue now or have conflict now, but we're in a position where we can be like, babe, I'm sorry, I reacted, I overreacted, or I was triggered in that moment, I'm really sorry, or I feel hurt by this. And all these micro moments of where we can learn to communicate differently is actually what's changed big shifts in our relationship. And what I find really amazing from the whole thing, and what I found amazing is that we've had moments of integration, because integration is just as important as being and doing the work. When you're in the thick of it, it's really hard. So even with me, and you'll probably understand as well with other clients, when say clients want to renew, sometimes it's great to just start again. Like we just, we book a call in for the following week and we get going again. But sometimes it's nice for people to have a break. Let's like reconnect in a month's time. Let's reconnect in 2 months' time. Because the way in which I described it was like you have a bucket of sand and water. So in this bucket is water and sand. And every time you go on a coaching call, every time you're having these conversations, every time you're literally in the thick of it, it's like putting your hand in the bucket and swishing it around. So sand and water is just all mixed together. But what we don't see when we're in this moment of support and growth and healing is at the same time there's a sieve taking the sand out. But because the sand and the water is so mixed together, you don't see any change. And you just feel like you're in the thick of shit. Nothing's changing, nothing's improving, we're not getting anywhere, we're just going around in circles. Then when you have space for things to integrate, the sand then settles. And then you're like, oh, there's a little bit less sand this time. And you then start to see the growth. So one thing that I really recommend is, as much as doing this work, individually and together, is also having space that doesn't revolve around the work. What do you want to do to have fun together? Like, what do you want to, like, how do you interact with one another when you're not getting coached every week? And for Sam and I, we had a 2-month break, and we went to Mexico for the winter. And we got to Mexico, we'd had 2 months break, like just prepping before we left the UK to go to Mexico. And we were in such a beautiful space, and we started to see the differences, how we showed up for each other, how we communicated, how we were intimate with each other, how we kept up with our practices, how we kept up with prioritizing ourselves and our boundaries and the relationship. Like, we actually saw everything that we'd been working on now happening, and we were like, oh shit, wow, we're really seeing how it's worked. Then it was like, right, we're ready to go back in to have more calls. Great, it was a really great space for us to have that. And then we had another 2-month break when we come home. And again, the integration is when you start to really see the change.
Yeah.
And what I think is beautiful is, like, not unplanned, but Sam and I are now having a baby. And yay! So even recording this, I'm 4.5 months, and it came to such a surprise. And we had a break from the coaching. And again, in that, I've had a really challenging first trimester. And I really saw how Sam stepped and supported me. And this is what I think is important, because I know I touched on it in the beginning of, like, there was no space for him to lead. There was no space for him to be himself in the relationship, because I was dominating it, and I didn't know what that meant. I didn't know how I was doing that. I never saw that. And now I can see how I did it. And I think that's a massive change, because so often women say, oh, I want my guy to lead. So they organise something, they plan a date, or they book a restaurant, or they do something, and we immediately find fault. Oh, this is not the restaurant I choose. Oh, I wouldn't do it that way. Why have you booked that? Why have you done that? Why are you wearing that? And it's like, I did it so much, and I didn't realise how much that actually was equating to me taking up the space. Because if someone does that to you, you're going to be like, well, fuck off. I'm not going to help. I'm not going to do it next time.
Exactly. So tell me, like, I'd love for you to share, like, your story is so amazing. I think it's going to inspire everybody. But just in what would you say to a woman listening who's been cheated on and doesn't know if healing is possible?
I would say start with yourself, because you're not going to know if the relationship is what you want, if he is what you want, until you know who you are and what you want. Because we naturally build such an identity about relationships. I think it's really common for a lot of people to merge into the relationship, that they don't prioritize themselves, they don't really know themselves. That's a common thing that women come to me with, of like, I abandoned everything about myself and I just did everything that they wanted in the relationship. So I think when there has been a rupture like that, and you don't know whether or not you want to repair it, one, if you don't know, don't make any fast decisions. But I would say first and foremost, get solo support.
Yes.
Because if you don't know who you are, you don't know what you want. And something like this really impacts your identity, I think, personally, because it highlights so many layers of wounding that already existed. And then it also highlights an identity that you've built around cheating. Because I had to really sit with the identity of, I would never get back with someone who did this to me. And I had to let that version of me die and really see the bigger picture of it all. But I didn't know, similar to when Sam had reached out and said, I would love to give this another try. I said, I don't know. And I got so much support, and I had people like breaking it all down for me, taking me into beautiful practices, really going into introspective parts of myself of like, why do I want to give this another try?
Yeah.
And I think that's what's most important, is like, why do I want to do this? Mm-hmm. If your reason is like, I don't want to be on my own, that's not a good enough reason in my opinion. Like, the fear of being on your own is not a good enough reason to stay in this relationship. But you don't know what you want and why you want it until you're in that space.
Yes. Yes, I love that. Okay, and what would you say to someone who cheated and doesn't know if they deserve love again?
Or I would say you definitely deserve love. And I would say it's not about the cheating. There's so many layers to it. It's so complex. And I would say go and get support. Go to someone who can hold you with love without judgment. And as much as we want to turn to our friends, there's still a bias. And the whole purpose of going to a professional, whether it is a coach or whether it is a therapist, is we see it through a lens of we see it through an unbiased lens. You know, the premise of it is that we don't attach our experience and our trauma and our wounding to the situation. You know, I've had people come to me because they've cheated, and people say, well, do you find that challenging? And I say, no. You know, also I also did it, but in a different way to Sam. But at the end of the day, it's got nothing to do with that. And I think for the person that has cheated, that was an outlet for you. And it was an outlet from something a lot deeper. And everybody deserves love. Everybody deserves a second chance. And the second chance doesn't have to come from the person that you cheated on or the person that cheated on you. But everyone deserves a second chance because we're human. We make mistakes. And I think it's easy for other people to say, I would never do that. And, you know, you and I have both lived that narrative of saying the same things. People don't really know until they're in it. You know, I had someone who come to me recently. She's got 3 kids. Her partner's never shown any signs of it, and then he's cheated. Yeah. He's just gone through a massive layer of grief. There are so many things that stir things up. We don't know. And really, it's like, it's not about what you did, it's about what you do next.
Yes.
That's what's the most important thing. And
yes.
I really believe how do I want to word that? I really believe that the quality of your relationship is in the quality of your repair. And by that, it doesn't mean that you continue with that partner if you don't want to, but it means that you're learning, because whether or not you stay with that person, that work that you do on yourself is never going to be wasted, because the work that you and your ex-husband did was not wasted work because you and him decided not to get back together, because now everything that you learned from that, all the growth that you did in that season, has determined the relationship that you have with Adam and actually got you to a point of where you attracted a man like Adam. And I think that is the same for anyone, whether or not you're doing the work because you have a desire to repair your relationship, whether or not that relationship actually repairs to the point that you reconnect or not, it's never going to be wasted work, because you're going to be a different person. You're going to be a match for a man that maybe is more aligned to you, or a woman who is more aligned to you. And that's really the power of it. It's never wasted work. So yeah, that's what I would say.
If you're listening and you're in that raw place of betrayal, not knowing what's next, I want to invite you into a softening session. It's a safe first step where you'll be held without judgment and you can start to feel what repair looks like, whether that's with your partner or within yourself.
Yeah, I love that. Oh, Jess, thank you so much. It's been such an honor for you to share this with us. And I feel that there's so much healing from just me hearing you talk about this, having been on 2 different sides of the coin. And I really hope that anybody who's listening to this is going to feel the same way. And thank you for sharing your heart. I really appreciate it. It moved me so much for you to share that you believe that anybody who cheated still deserves love, because I think that's one of the biggest stories that we carry of anybody who has been the one who's cheated. So thank you so much. And this episode is a reminder that betrayal isn't the end. Sometimes it's the portal to a deeper kind of love, but only if both people are willing to do the work.
Totally. And I just want to say, final thing, we've never been happier. I've never been happier. I've never felt more me. I've never felt more in love. I never knew this was possible.
Yeah.
But a year ago was in the thick of it. So it gets better. Yeah. Thank you, babe. Yay.
Bye, darling.
Bye.
Thank you for listening to the Deeper Love podcast. If today's episode spoke to you, hit subscribe so you don't miss the next one. And if you're ready to go deeper, you'll find all the ways to work with me in the show notes. Until next time.